Hi folks, this is video number 38. This one's going to be a little bit longer, and the title is Moose Hunt. It was the second week of September 1978. Al, my game commission boss, called. He was scheduled to go on a fly-in moose hunting trip with two fellas from the Berwick area. They had just called him and canceled out. Al asked me to see if I wanted to go. It would cost $600 plus gas and hotel to travel. We would be hunting in northern Ontario. I ran it past the wife, and she said to go, as I may never get another opportunity. I told him I would have to see about getting the time off from work and getting a small loan from the United Penn Bank. I called work and was able to get the time off. Next stop, the bank. I went down the hill to the Mashopin branch of the United Penn Bank and asked to see Lee Poston. He was the branch manager. I knew him well, as his son played on my Little League team. I told him what happened to Al, and I wanted to get a personal loan for $600 to go moose hunting. Lee was an avid hunter, and he said he thought that was an excellent reason to give me a loan. I signed a couple papers and got the money put in a checking account. Just as I pulled in the drive, Lou came home. I walked over to him and told him what transpired. I told him to see if he could go. He talked with Karen and got the time off from work. He went down to the bank to see Poston. He knew Lou pretty good, too. I guess when Lou asked him for $600 to go moose hunting, he asked if there was something in the water in the development. Lou got the loan, and next up was getting with Al to plan our trip. We were limited to 100 pounds of equipment each. That included tents, sleeping bags, clothes, food, and a canoe. We planned carefully food-wise. We figured we could offset our supply with fish we would catch. So we packed Lou's nice new 78 Ford Super Cab and headed north for 15 hours. The city of North Bay was about halfway. It was a nice city. What struck me was how clean it was. Everything looked new. We were to meet the outfitter in Island Falls. Island Falls was amazing. It looked just like Dodge City on Gunsmoke. Dirt streets, horse rails, wooden sidewalks, and of course the saloon. We were to meet the outfitter in the saloon. The saloon had faded red butterfly swinging doors, just like Miss Kitty's place. The big bar and mirrors and all the round poker tables. As we walked in, a fellow in the corner at one of the tables motioned us to come over and have a seat. He was our contact. We conducted business and got licenses and tags. He told us to follow the road out of town and drive 35 miles. The road would end at a reservoir. We would see a small camper and the float plane. The pilot would be there. On the way out of town, there was a big blue sign with white letters. The sign said, "Notice, no food, services, or civilization from this point north." Then we drove 35 miles to the plane. We loaded the plane and strapped the 34-pound, 10-foot Radisson canoe to the pontoon struts on one side. We flew for a half hour. All I saw besides spruce trees and water was one railroad track. We landed on a lake about the size of Harvey's Lake. It's 5 miles around, just to give you an idea if you've ever been there. The name of our lake and home for the next 2 weeks was Little Agassiz. The plane glided up to the makeshift dock consisting of 2 spruce logs lashed together, just enough to walk on and get the gear out and onto land. Our campsite was nice and level and about 3 feet above the water level and mostly grass. The pilot gave us an orange bag to put out as a signal if we needed help. We were to put it on a pole that was at the end of the spruce logs. He would fly over once a day. No orange bag, no landing, and we wouldn't be back till the next day, weather permitting. If you broke your leg 10 minutes after he flew over, he wasn't coming back for 24 hours. Maybe. I recall there being a picnic table, as we did our cooking on it with the Coleman stove. There were 4 spruce trees close to the table, and we brought a roll of plastic. We wrapped the plastic around the trees to create a little cookhouse that would block the wind and rain. It worked out pretty good. Our tent was big enough for the three of us and all our gear. We could walk out of the tent and right into the cookhouse. Once we got squared away, it was time for a little fishing. The pickerel were easy to catch. In about 20 minutes you could get 2 or 3 nice ones to go along with the potatoes and other things we brought. The pickerel here in the States are two-tone green. Up north they are marked the same, but are two-tone powder blue. Really a beautiful fish. The grouse up north are also powder blue. Why, I have no idea, but they sure are pretty. Lou and I bought a couple slingshots and practiced with them before we left. We got pretty good with them and figured we might be able to kill a grouse if we had a chance. I thought we should take a bag of ball bearings with us. Lou figured we'd use gravel we'd pick up. Guess what? We were so far north, the whole area was bog. There wasn't a stone in 100 miles of us. All the trees were spruce, about 20 feet tall. They went on for miles and miles. Lots of pine cones. We used them in the slingshots to deter the Canadian jays. They had never seen people and were unafraid. You would be sitting there eating dinner off a paper plate and plop! A jay would land right on your plate. They yelled some when they got stung with a pine cone. The jays were medium gray color and had a black band across their eyes, similar to a raccoon. We were in the middle of the 3rd week of September now. We explored the lake and used our homemade moose call. One of the first evenings, Al and Lou took a ride. They went up to the north end of the lake, and I stayed back to clean up camp. When they got back, they told me they had run into some otters. The otters would surface alongside the canoe and spit water on them. You could see the areas they used for slides in the water and their dumping spots. There wasn't much for lily pads, etc., that the moose would eat. That wasn't too promising. We had a small map that showed another small lake a short distance east of ours. The next day, Lou and I ventured to the other side of the lake in our little canoe. Al was going to hang out at camp and plot out dinner. We paddled over to the east shore and beached the canoe. Everything was moss about waist deep. It was like trudging through snow. The little lake wasn't too far through the woods. We checked it out pretty good. Not much for aquatic plants there either. While we were gone, the wind came up and was just howling through the trees. When we got back to the canoe, there were 3 to 4 foot whitecaps on the lake. Camp was about a half a mile on the other side. It was too dangerous to try to cross in those conditions. After all, our canoe was only 10 feet long and weighed only 34 pounds. You could throw it on your shoulder with one hand. We decided to take a nap. We lay down in the moss. It was quite comfortable. There were also cranberries. We just lay there eating those delicious berries, and we took a nap. Well, we hung out all afternoon. It gets dark pretty quick that far north. The waves were still about 3 foot high, but we figured we didn't have much choice now. We had to chance it or stay the night. We decided to chance it. We took off our belts and lashed our rifles to the cross supports. That way, if we did flip, we wouldn't lose our guns. The plan was to paddle out about 50 yards or so and then head south until we broke the tree line and got into calmer water. Then we could paddle around near shore until we got back to camp. I did a lot of canoe paddling in my younger days, but that was the toughest paddling I ever did. Ironically, about 10 minutes after we got back to camp, totally spent, the wind died down and the lake flattened right out. But it was just about dark, so everything worked out. Al had dinner ready. We talked about exploring the feeder stream coming in the upper end of the lake. I told the guys I had enough canoe paddling the day before and I was just going to hang out for a while. They headed out, were gone about an hour or so. I went over to shore. The sight tapered down to the water. I sat down at the water's edge and looked up the lake. Wow, it sure was foggy up there. It would be tough to see a moose in that. Being flat, the fog was rolling right down the lake. All of a sudden, whoosh, I was covered with snow. We got about 2 inches laid down in the time it took me to type this. The afternoon cleared up and it turned out to be a nice day. We caught a few pickerel here and there. We made coffee and tea with spruce water. It was brown, but it was just fine to drink and cook with. The 4th week of September, it got a little chilly at night. We had made a latrine for ourselves off to the side of the campsite. We had one of those seats with the folding legs under it. It worked fine, except for being first in the morning because you had to chip the ice off the seat. When we were exploring, we just positioned ourselves over a low branch for support. Worked fine. After a morning and part of the afternoon hunting, we got back at camp and Lou and Al were going to hang out. I decided to go fishing for a while. I took my little box of lures and my 5.5-foot telescoping pole with my Garcia 408 reel with 8-pound test line. Jumped in the canoe and paddled out into the lake about 100 yards. Most of my lures were small, about 1.5-inch spoons, etc. They were great for the blue pickerel. Just for the heck of it, I had thrown in a 4-inch red and white Daredevil spoon. I hooked that on the swivel and cast it out towards the center of the lake. The weeds were only 2 or 3 feet below the surface, so I started cranking as soon as the lure hit the water. It didn't go far, and I got some resistance. The way it felt, I thought I had snagged some weeds anyway. The resistance was constant, but I kept reeling in. To my amazement, it wasn't a bunch of weeds. A huge northern pike surfaced like a submarine right next to and parallel to the canoe. Of all the stuff we brought, we did not bring a camera, so you have to take my word for what comes next. I had a 5.5-foot canoe paddle. It was lying on the floor. The bottom edge was even with the pike's nose. His tail was 6 inches past the other end. This was a world record northern pike. He probably weighed 60 to 70 pounds. He was at least a foot in diameter. If you tuck your elbows into your ribs with your forearms extended and fold your fingers to point at each other and then touch the tips together, that would be a good representation of the size of that fish's mouth. There were teeth protruding along the side like an alligator. His eyes were bright orange and about the size of quarters or larger. This was the largest fish I've ever seen. I had no net, no gaff, no gun. The fish did not put up a fight and certainly wasn't tired. His mouth was big enough to take my arm off at the elbow. Reaching in and gilling him was out of the question. If by some miracle I was able to get him in that tinfoil canoe, he'd probably beat a hole in it. So I just enjoyed the experience, and we just eyeballed each other for another minute or so. Then he started to slowly swim away. I cranked the pole down to the water and gave a quick snap and broke the 8-pound line and said goodbye to my lure and monster pike. That may very well have been the first time he was ever hooked. Well, we had good weather for most of the 2 weeks, right up until the last day. It poured. The plane was supposed to come in at 7 a.m. The cloud ceiling was actually laying on top of the trees. No way would he be flying. We still had to break camp and get as ready as we could. The weather changed quickly as there are no mountains to slow or divert any weather. We dug a hole and burned our trash. It was mostly paper plates, etc., and the cookhouse plastic. Once everything was burned, we filled the hole back in, as well as the latrine. Everything was damp. Well, the day was about gone, and Al started peeling our last couple potatoes. The sky had lifted quite a bit, and the plane came in about 5 p.m. The wait time was actually our hotel time on the return trip. Not being able to get out, we would now have to drive straight through, as Lou and I had to be back to go to work. We agreed to each drive a tank of gas and then switch drivers. The last person to drive would sleep in the back seat. The guys didn't get as much sleep as I did. Lou's truck had a small shimmy at around 55 miles an hour. He could tell I was getting on it because the shimmy would come and go pretty quick. When we got home, my wife was a little ticked that I didn't call. I explained to her that on the way up we passed a sign that said, "From this point all water flows north." And I explained that no food, services, or civilization notice too. We didn't hear or see hide nor hair of a moose, but we each have our own special memories of a great trip. I'm glad we went. Al's been gone for over 10 years now. He was a good friend as well as a good mentor. I learned a lot from him and consider it an honor to have known him. We had a couple other fishing trips I'll relate in the near future. And this concludes our little adventure called Moose Hunt. All the best, everyone.